Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, WinCC OA New Features, version 3.15. I'm James Mowry, Operations Manager here at KAASM. As we get started, note that this 30-minute webinar is being recorded and will be available via the KAASM YouTube channel after the presentation. Also note that you should all be muted, so if you have any questions or comments throughout the webinar, please click the question icon on your screen and type it in. We'll address all your questions and comments at the end. I'll go ahead and hand over the microphone now to Sean Sandoval, President at KAASM, to begin the presentation.
All right, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this brief webinar. We're going to cover a few things on the new features of WinCC Open Architecture, but to get started, for all the new attendees to our KAASM webinar, a few notes about KAASM. We are a Siemens Industry, Inc. and Product Lifecycle Management Advanced Technology Partner. We are a reseller for Siemens, and we provide essentially three key areas: digital solutions, so the products and services, support for all the products, and also offer training for sustainability for the solutions in the market. So essentially sales, support, and training for the West Regional United States. A few notable comments. We are recognized by the Department of Homeland Security as an ICS cert organization. We've worked with over 300 customers over the years, and we've architected systems from the hundreds to hundreds of thousands of data points. Also, we believe in open source and educational events. If you're interested, you can visit us at kaasm.com/training or /events, and you can see a list of regional either webinars or tech tours that you can attend and learn a little bit more about our products and solutions. Today, we're going to cover three key areas for the new features released with version 3.15 of WinCC Open Architecture. One, I'm going to cover the user interface enhancements and new features. And then we'll talk a little bit about business logic and what has changed there within the platform. And then a little bit more connectivity options with the different drivers and enhancements and new features. So let's start off with some of the user interface changes. The 5 key areas here are the release of the desktop UI, also some layout enhancements that provides even further resolution agnostic capability of WinCC Open Architecture, more modern engineering design of the development environment, object-oriented screen references, and then the use of JavaScript graphic libraries. Let's talk about the desktop UI. This is new to version 3.15. This effectively replaces the former web client, but this is a user interface like an app for all platforms. It also provides an overview of all projects, similar to what the mobile UI does. And then also the distribution of the installation package. It's an exe file that is delivered through the web page. So very easy to get it installed on a workstation desktop type application, as you can just log into a web page and it will give you the installation package immediately. The benefits there: increased usability, improved security with it as well, and then also an overview of connected devices through the desktop UI list of all the different servers that you can connect to from that one client. Use cases there is the ability to distribute that executable package over the network, and then also the distribution of the project files of a WinCC OA server. So an update of all of the clients that are on a network. And once again, to note, this is the replacement for the WinCC OA web client. So to round out the Runtime family, we essentially have 3 core clients for WinCC Open Architecture: the aforementioned desktop UI, the mobile UI, which is available for use. You can download it now in the iOS Apple Store or the Android Store. There is an application sitting on the cloud that you can interact and see what the mobile UI looks and feels like. And then also our HTML5 client, the ultralight client user experience. That is an overview of the UI Runtime family. Later on, you'll see a quick demo of the desktop UI provided by our VP of Technology, Kirk Kemble, who is also joining me today on this presentation. To talk a little bit about layout enhancements, functions here is there's a grid layout and layout inheritance where you can quickly add symbols and maintain resolution agnostic capability with the client. So you can realize dynamic capabilities with not only your dashboards, but all of your SCADA screens that you can build. And then also this is responsive during runtime whenever you're adding it through the development environment as well. So the benefits here is no limitation to screen resolution, 100% responsive, and then the arrangement of objects in layouts is also the capability there. In later webinars, we'll be focusing on some of these key features to dig down a little bit deeper. If you have more questions about it, feel free to ask or submit an email to info@kaasm.com, and we can help you understand, and we have some demo seed projects to look at that as well. Modern engineering design. Inside the WinCC OA development environment, the system management tool has been enhanced. So that is all built with the responsive design, new icons, and new functionality there. We'll be showing you that towards the end of the presentation. Debugger enhancements. WinCC OA has a very nice debug tool. New functions like being able to debug the initialize script, activate and deactivate persistent breakpoints, conditional breakpoints, and then the control++ data types are available. We will be having another webinar on that, as we typically utilize that, and our customers seem to really like it to be able to debug a lot of their scripting code that they're putting into their projects. Object-oriented screen references. This is in beta, so we're looking forward to further enhancements for this, but the idea here is that we can provide user-defined properties, user-defined events, and encapsulation within a screen reference. The benefit is we can reduce the engineering effort there because we create a lot of reusable object-oriented code sets there, and improve testability for references, the stability of those references, and then changeability of those references. One of the feature sets that everybody's pretty excited about with the release of v3.15 is the support for JavaScript libraries. And please make note, this is JavaScript, not Java. These are two totally different technologies. But within the JavaScript graphical libraries, there's a lot of different open source widgets, if you will, out there in the market that can now be leveraged inside of WinCC Open Architecture. So one, for example, is the d3.js library. So if you do a web search, and you can see a lot of these different graphical libraries that are available. Different use cases is that you can now use some of these pre-built JavaScript widgets to create your own unique dashboards and leverage a lot of the pre-built functionality that's available out there on the web. Moving on to business logic, and let's talk a little about some core areas of focus. The release of SmartSCADA was just provided with this version of WinCC Open Architecture. I'll talk a little bit about that. The C# API. Anyone who's worked with WinCC OA for some time know that we have a well-documented published API, and that has been further enhanced. And then object-oriented scripting, support for high availability clusters via VMware, and then further enhancements with the SIL rating that we have with the software. So let's talk a little bit about SmartSCADA. So what is it? Essentially, it's the ability to train data and to get your WinCC OA server to learn from that data and then provide information to make changes immediately for among the situational awareness components of your entire system. And a core component of this is a statistical engine that we brought into WinCC Open Architecture called R. R language is a statistical way of creating these different types of data correlations and data mining that can now be brought into WinCC Open Architecture. Use cases to provide a heavy root cause analysis capability, define key performance indicators to all devices with one click, and then find dependency by using correlation. Data correlation, define timeframes, filter values, being able to look at all data, correlate it, and then slice it on whatever values that you need, whether it's a week, hourly, minute, monthly, to be able to find those underlying challenges within your system that you can focus on continuous improvement with. So essentially, there's the circle there on the right that you're noticing. It all starts with the data mining and building out your data structures, classifying that data, and then that data, once it's classified, can be developed into that key performance indicator, and then that cycle just continues throughout the process. The more that your data grows, the more that that data becomes and is able to train the system. There's a learning component there for the system that it starts operating and making people aware and triggering alarms, work orders, and so forth to be a little bit more smart in terms of finding the underlying downtime or underlying root causes for upsets within your process. Take a look at what a SmartSCADA architecture looks like. Essentially, you can have your WinCC OA server, which is the graphic that you see there on the left, in correlation with a WinCC OA SmartSCADA server. So the idea here is that you have a dedicated analytics server that is doing those three core areas: data mining, classifying the data, and then providing the key performance indicators. We will be having a focused webinar on this to show what this looks like and how you set it up and how you can visualize the data and do that data mining and statistical analysis of your information. Also, moving along with the business logic, the C# API. Please note, WinCC OA is platform independent. However, the published API for the C# functionality is currently only available for Windows environments. So the idea here is the functions are available for read-write query process values, acknowledging alerts, query history, manage data points, read configs, DP exists, and then also this is all licensed through the WinCC OA API license. Benefits here is there's a large community around C# developers. Also, there's a large number of .NET libraries available. And so the theme with WinCC Open Architecture to the community is there's a lot of leveraged open source technologies out there, especially in the C# and the JavaScript world, that WinCC OA enables these technologies to be brought in to further enhance your deployments of WinCC OA servers. C# API and C# facade. Also further enhancements here, but synchronous and asynchronous methods, multi-threading by design, task parallel libraries, integrated data type mapping, error handling by exception. So the benefits all here are leveraging that C# code base and reusing that C# code base, sequential or non-blocking program flows, use of multiple threads within one C# application, and then native C# data types, along with the special handling of OA exceptions are possible within this functional area. Object-oriented scripting has been enhanced, so functions that can provide the classes, struct, enum, and inheritance, code reuse. Once again, really focused on the object-oriented environment to further push on being smarter with our code sets so that we can repeat versus spending all your time pounding on keys, developing the code itself. Really exciting here on the VMware cluster, WinCC Open Architecture's redundancy features, but not only can we do just standard redundancy, as I'm showing here in a graphic, where if you have one server fail over, the other server becomes immediately active, but through a vSphere storage or VMware, we can now have multi-server redundancy. So let's say if that server becomes active, that other redundant partner goes down, and we need to fail over to another server. Now we have the options of creating a multi-server redundancy to where you can not only pick up a secondary server, but a secondary server to that initial backup. So this enhances the further availability of the system and really enhances the ability to build unique architectures to push on zero data loss for our customers. Disaster recovery, keynote here, WinCC Open Architecture has been safety integrated level 3 for quite some time now. Note to all of our users and new potential customers that WinCC Open Architecture has renewed that license, and essentially the Siemens Group goes back every 3 years to resubmit. Another key note there is that we do send the code sets for WinCC OA away to TUV to get audited, and that's how we get this SIL 3 certificate. And so the cool thing there is that we can verify that our software platform is stable, and that's verified by a third party, not Siemens itself. Talk a little bit about connectivity and the drivers for WinCC Open Architecture. Some enhancements here. We just released the SIMATIC S7 Plus driver. So what that does is natively creates symbolic addressing connectivity to the new Siemens controllers, which are the 1200s and 1500 series. Also, there's a TIA portal export tool, plugin built into TIA portal that will connect your OA servers directly to the PLC programming environment there. All done via a wizard. The release of a few new drivers, WinCC OA can be turned into an OPC UA server, and it can also be now turned into a Modbus server. There's also support for the Logo 8 and also as a TLS gateway. Multi-tenancy was also just released for this. So the SIMATIC S7 Plus, let's talk a little bit about that. So it can be polling or a subscription-based setup with that. It's official Siemens library support. So if you are familiar with the new Siemens S7 controllers, they're really nifty, and you can program them with a really enhanced development environment, which is the TIA portal. Now we can directly connect through that, and the plugin and everything to that's fairly nice, and we'll show you what that looks like here in a second. But really the cool benefit here is you're now dealing directly with native symbolic addressing, and then the connectivity with the controller, pretty seamless and nice. The TIA export tool, the functions here is that this is a plugin for it, and you can configure the new connection and export all your data from TIA portal. And the use case here would be to do that and then leverage the wizard inside of OA to completely import all PLC data as needed. Benefits: one-click export, one-click configuration, and then maintain know-how protection, and then the readability from WinCC OA. Additional drivers, so talked a little bit about or mentioned Modbus server, and now we can support Modbus protocol as a server. So WinCC OA has had a native Modbus TCP/IP and serial driver for quite some time. Now you can turn the entire WinCC OA server into a Modbus server. Okay, and you can use the plant modeling tool to do that. A TLS gateway is also standard as a client and a server, and then the Logo Smart relays, there's also now connectivity to that as well. Benefits here: extend your architecture with different types of protocols like Modbus. Realize a complicated architecture for traffic applications. WinCC OA has a lot of infrastructure type application, some components there that lend itself directly to that vertical market. Multi-tenancy, what is it at a high level? It's the ability to be able to segment data to specific users. And it's not just OPC, it can be OPC, OPC-DA, or Modbus. But the idea here is to provide data from one place, but segment it only the needed information to the correct clients that are subscribing to the system. Okay, so to give you a graphical overview of this, the pretty colored master system there represents the WinCC OA server, and it's all communications via TCP/IP. What we can do is now take segmented data, and this is an example of OPC UA, but once again, it could be Modbus or OPC DA. Now we can parse out, not parse out, but segment that data into these unique areas that we can now provide to user A, user B, or user C to keep the data separated from each other and provided to the correct personnel. And then just a quick update on new operating systems supported. So OpenSUSE Leap, and then the vSphere High Availability Cluster. Talk a little bit about the supported browsers. So the operating systems for mobile devices, when we start talking about our iOS operator or mobile UIs, the iOS store and Android devices for operating systems are supported. And then from a client side, from just running either ultralight or the desktop UI, Microsoft Edge 10 or higher, Edge 25 or higher is new, and then Internet Explorer 10 or higher has been in there, and then Firefox and Chrome as well. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Kirk Kimball so he can show you a few of these new enhancements, and then we can close out with any questions that you may have. So thank you for your time.
Okay, let's see. We're going to talk about some of these enhancements or some of these new features that came out with the 3.15 release of WinCC OA. And I guess in the interest of time, I've already launched a project in the background. Getty is open. Getty is the graphical editor. And then I've opened up the system management panel. So we'll talk about one of the very first things that Sean mentioned is the enhancements to the system management panel itself. We see we can now drag and change this layout. The layout and the way these icons reconfigure themselves is actually an enhancement from the new layout management tool. So what enables this functionality is that new layout function or layout tool. And as Sean mentioned, we will go into depth on the use of that tool in future sessions. Now onto the desktop UI. As Sean mentioned, to actually load the control, you have to have a project running in the background. The project can be local or it could be remote. For purposes of this demonstration, everything is running on the same computer, so it'll be local. But from the project, we also need to have this web client control manager running. And if you attended our last presentation, this is what all I'm doing is extending the application that I built with the pump station. Once we go to the local host, you'll get this pop-up on downloading the desktop UI. It's that lightweight control that replaces the web client, and that control is only 54 megabytes in size. Once the control is downloaded, install that with user admin privileges, and then we can close that page altogether. You will not require a web browser to access the OA server if you're using the desktop UI from here forward. In the background, we see we have some documentation on the WinCC OA C# API. We'll come back to that one in a minute. Now, with the UI installed, we'll find that we can locate that application in the build under the Siemens Automation install directory. And it's a separate application, the WinCC OA desktop UI. When we launch this project, there's a reason I have the system management panel up, and you'll understand it in a second. When we launch the user interface, we just have this standard simple projects layout. We have to first define a project, and in this case, it'll be the local host. So this would be the DNS name, the actual name of the server, or an IP address. What's the connection port? We'll go with a secured connection, and then you can pass in authentication if it's configured. As soon as we save the project, it queries it, and launching this, we'll get the standard security pop-ups, the SSL security pop-ups. I've got a walkthrough for clearing this out from certain systems. But right now we just accept and store these things permanently. And then I get a pop-up that this device needs to be authorized. And this is the reason why the system management panel is open. So how do we authorize this? And this goes to Sean's point earlier on adding additional security to your process control network. We authorize a device by opening the system management panel, going into settings, and then clicking on the device management selector. From here, we see the name of the device, my desktop computer, in this case a virtual machine, and its unique identifier is trying to connect to the server, and it needs authentication, or it needs authorization. We authorize that by putting a check in this box and this unlock, and then we can now close this. I'll leave it running in the background. It sees it pulled in the basic process information. And when I launch this one more time, we'll see that the application does launch and that I've acquired and pulled a UI and I've been unlocked. We'll add the simple selector. And if you recall, this is the very same interface that I put together that we accessed using the the ultralight client UX framework, and that's the HTML5. We can navigate, turn things on and off, as well as simulate stuff. So this is the desktop UI, and in this case, we're using the responsive template. We have all the same functionality with looking at alarm data. And we see that it's already been unlocked. Okay, close this wizard. Now, with the Getty open in the background, I want to get away from the desktop UI and that functionality, and I want to talk about some of the other the new enhanced features, the object-oriented programming within the panels, as well as JavaScript. And you may or may not be aware of this, but with WinCC, when you create a brand new project, you actually get some seed and example panels with it. I have a lot of sub-projects integrated in here. If you want to know how to bring these into a project, as Sean mentioned, send an email to info@kaasm.com, or if you have my email, just send me an email direct. I could walk you through this if you're unfamiliar with it. But whenever you create a brand new project, you always have the standard 315 container or seed project. If we expand the panels and look at the examples, you'll notice that there are a couple of new folders under here. First off, let's just look at the JavaScript example. And the JavaScript example is a panel that we can in turn test and run. I may not have, is loaded from subtract, yep. And this is telling me that there's some files that are missing that I need to move from one folder to another folder. So we're going to look at this really quick. Suppose I should have had this one set up. So we go to the Siemens install directory, automation OA, data HTML, data HTML. We'll go ahead and pull the whole HTML folder out. And this needs to be, this whole folder here needs to be copied over into the local working project. And by default, my working project is in the WinCC OA projects directory, presentation, data, and then we'll copy that into here. Now, for this to work, it should be okay. Close. We'll test the project one more time. And we see we actually have some data, and behind the scenes, there's an inspector that pops up so we can see the JavaScript occurring as well. This JavaScript actually is this example panel actually is an example of the radar plot that is used by the SmartSCADA utility. So very simple, we're just passing in data points, the execution of the push button. To find out how this is done, this is an example in all of your existing projects. You can tear this apart. There's a in-depth help file that walks you through how these things are developed as well. Also in this example directory is the object-oriented panel. So we're done with the JavaScript for right now, and we'll go into the object-oriented panel design. Opening the OOP main panel gives us a very unique and interactive panel. Yep. Again, it asks me if I want to save things locally, that we can turn things on or off. But it's how we're integrating or how we're accessing this data that's really interesting with this new framework, with the object-oriented programming panel design. So if we actually look at the runtime panel or the development panel, we see we have a number of embedded subcomponents. This traffic light, if we right mouse click over that and open up this panel reference, is really just a panel. So when I click on a button, that button is just triggering some unique event. Where does this event live? And how is it enabled? It is enabled by extending the scope library for this class. It's an extension of the class itself. The panel is considered a class in this case. And all we're doing is enabling an event switch lights with an integer value. When we drag and drop, in this case, this is that traffic light. When we drag and drop this onto a panel, we see we have a different form. Not all of the, and we now, I should say, with the embedded panel, have the ability to do scripting on the object. Typically, this doesn't happen in the environment, or I should say, this doesn't happen with a panel reference environment. So this is that new feature. And in this case, we could actually apply scripting to the switch lights function. So let's see how they did that with this object. Initialize, click on the extended tab. Let's look at the script lights. And the cool thing about this is we can now see that I am on the parent container, or I'm on the parent panel, but I am accessing objects and I'm performing attribute modifications to the embedded panel. It is actually turning on and changing the color of the backgrounds for these ellipses, which is the new feature. That is the object-oriented programming. You have to create a scope to pass the data into the reference panel and pull the data out of the reference panel to make the changes in real time. Again, it's an example here. You can tear this apart and see how they did this. And if you have any other questions regarding this, you can send an email to info@kaasm.com or send me an email direct if you have that. We won't save that. So that is the object-oriented programming, the JavaScript. We'll also note, with that, we can close this. We'll also note in the background, I've enabled an S7 Plus driver. So what does the I/O addressing look? Oh, shoot, the I/O addressing look like for this? Of course, I don't have that right here. I guess I didn't need to close Getty. We'll open up Para. So within Para, I can assign, and we cover this in training as well. Many of you who are on this webinar are very familiar with adding a configuration to a data point element. A data point or a configuration is just extending the runtime functionality. So we'll add in a periphery address, define the periphery address as a SIMATIC S7 Plus data point. And immediately it pulls in what the connection is, what PLC I'm talking to, what driver it's on. What it doesn't know yet is what the actual reference is. In the older versions of the S7 driver, we had to do direct data block addressing. Now we can actually query the project data points and directly link these. So this is the export that comes out of the TIA portal, so that I can see my data blocks and my data points. Directly assign them. It knows what the directions are, assigns the transformations, and then we can make it active by putting the check and apply. And now, as soon as I did that, if I had a PLC connected, I would start actively querying the data. And that's the S7 driver. So we do have symbolic name resolution. And to Sean's point earlier, there's an intermediate step that we have to perform to get to this level, but at some point in time, this driver will, when it hits its maturation, I would expect it to actually link directly to the symbol table in the PLC. More good things to come in the future. And then we'll open up the room for questions.
All right, thank you, Kirk. At this time, we'll answer some of the questions and comments we've received. So in the essence of time, we'll go ahead and get this one. This is regarding the interaction between TIA Portal and WinCC OA version 3.15. Says, what version of TIA Portal supports WinCC OA version 3.15? Kirk?
Let's see, am I unmuted? Okay. The versions that are currently supported, TIA Portal versions that are currently supported with the SIMATIC export utility tool are TIA Portal version 13 Service Pack 1 and TIA Portal version 14. There are two different installers in this, so care must be taken. If you have questions on what this looks like, again, send a request or an email to info@kaasm.com, and we'll make sure that we respond to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kirk. If we did not address your question, we may send you a follow-up email with the answer. Thank you, Sean and Kirk, and big thank you to all of our attendees. We look forward to seeing you at the next KAASM webinar. Stay tuned for details.